Hello, and welcome to the Centum Learning Networking Fundamentals.
So the first thing that we need to talk about when we're talking about internet speeds or data speeds are bits and bytes. So let's talk about what each one of those is. A bit is the smallest piece of data that a computer can process, and it's always either a 0 or a 1, on or off, yes or no. When you string a bunch of bits together, you get a byte. Whenever you see advertisements on TV for high-speed internet, they're always referring to bits or bits per second. And that's because when you measure in bits, it's the smallest possible amount, you're going to get the highest numbers. If you were to talk about bytes, there's usually 8 bits in each byte. The numbers that you would get would be smaller. When we're talking about hardware like hard drives, thumb drives, secure digital cards, they're also usually measured, or their capacity is usually measured in bits, but sometimes you might see it measured in bytes. Generally, though, these things are also measured in bits or megabits. Now, when we're talking about bits and bytes, you're also going to see the term K or KB or M or MB. And those Ks and Ms simply refer to kilo. K is for kilo or thousand, and M is for mega or million. So 1 K bits is 1,000 bits. 1 M bits is 1 million bits. And to try and avoid confusion, when you ever see these terms in writing, you'll see bits in lowercase letters and bytes, which is the larger strung together bits, in uppercase letters. Now, without a frame of reference, it's hard to understand how much a megabit or a megabyte is. So let's talk about something that we're all familiar with, just so that we can get a scale of how much data is how much. Most of us have digital cameras, either in our cell phone or a standalone like this one. So we're familiar with the file sizes that you have to deal with when you take a picture. Now, the picture from a modern high-resolution digital camera can range anywhere from 1 megabyte to 10 megabytes in size. Of course, you can compress the images, and those file sizes are going to vary, but let's just say, for the sake of argument, that the file sizes for a high-resolution digital picture are between 1 and 3 megabytes. Now let's look at some hardware that we're all familiar with and see how a modern high-resolution picture file that we're familiar with would fit when we put it in the context of one of those pieces of hardware. I'm sure we all remember the old 56K modem. Now, on an old 56K modem, the 56 stood for bits, and the K stood for 1,000. And altogether, it was 56K bits per second. So in theory, you would be able to transfer a 56,000-bit file over this modem every second. Now, there's a lot of variables, and you would never actually reach that speed, but that's just a comparison. Your mileage may vary. So to download a picture from one of today's high-resolution cameras, like the one we saw a minute ago, on that 56K modem would take at least an hour, and probably a lot longer. Now, if we look at an old-style floppy disk, I'm sure you've probably got a few of those laying around in your drawers, that can hold 1.4 megabits, or 1,400,000 bits. So we might be able to squeeze one high-resolution picture from that digital camera onto this floppy disk. Again, sizes vary, there's compression that you can use to squeeze more on, but we're just talking about a file size or a picture size of about 1 megabyte. Now, when we look at a CD can store about 650 megabytes, so you'd be able to store a few hundred of these high-resolution images. So now hopefully you have a little bit of an idea of the speeds and the amount of data that we're talking about when we're talking about high-speed internet or file sizes, that sort of thing. Now let's talk about internet speed. It's important to remember that the internet is like a network of water pipes. It's actually easy if you think of it that way. Think of each connection on the internet as a water pipe. The bigger the pipe, the more water or data you can squeeze through it at any one time. Now, when you connect to some other computer or server on the internet, whether it's to download or look at a web page or to watch a video on YouTube or to download a movie to your computer, you're not connecting from your computer directly to that computer. You're usually connecting through several other connections before you get to that computer. Each one of those connections has its own dedicated pipe or internet connection. And each one of those connections can vary in size. Now, when we're talking about the connection between point A and point B, the maximum speed that you can go between A and B is going to be dependent on the smallest pipe between A and B. So if you have a high-speed internet connection of, let's say, 30 megabits per second, and you're trying to download a movie from some web server somewhere, if that connection on that web server is only 15 megabits per second, you're not going to be able to take advantage of your full big pipe, because the speed in this case is going to be limited by the speed of the connection at the other end. It could also be affected by any other connections in between that computer and your computer. The fastest connection that you'll ever get is dependent on the smallest link or the smallest pipe between point A and point B. Now, to confuse things even more, you're not the only person that's using these water pipes. You're not the only one taking a shower in the house. That web server that you're downloading that movie from or viewing that web page from has got hundreds, thousands, in some case, millions of other people trying to do the same thing. So the amount of water or the amount of data that they can squeeze through that pipe could be clogged. So even though you may have that wide open, high speed, 30 megabit per second download speed on your computer, they might also have a high speed connection at the other end, but if 10 million people are also trying to download movies at the same time, that pipe is going to get clogged, and you may not get that full speed or that full connection speed that you'd expect or think you can get. And just in case you weren't confused enough, we have what's called overhead. Now, overhead is the data that's going between your computer and the computer from where you're downloading or getting your data from, so that your computer and that computer are talking to each other to make sure that what you're downloading is what that computer is actually giving you. They're talking to each other, sending check bits and CRCs back and forth, just to make sure that the bit that you downloaded from their computer makes it correctly to your computer. So they do a little checksum, and they say, I'm sending an A. Your computer says, I received an A. They talk to each other, say, yep, they match. That's a good piece of data. Sometimes you might have downloaded an A, but you received a W. They talk to each other. They say, nope, they don't match. So it's got to send a request to send the data back, and it starts over again. That overhead can also reduce your overall amount of speed. Now, that overhead is generally pretty low and not usually a factor, but it is there, and it does have to be accounted for. Okay, so we've talked about bits and bytes, megabits, kilobits, kilobytes. We've talked about overhead. We've talked about bandwidth, pipe size. So hopefully so far you have a little bit of an understanding of what all these things mean. Now, let's talk about downloading and uploading. When you download something from the internet, that generally means that you're taking some data, whether it's a file, a picture, a website, a movie, doesn't matter. You're taking something from the internet and bringing it down to your computer. So think of the internet as up here and your computer right here, and you're downloading data. When you upload something, data is going from your computer up to the internet. An example of this might be when you're sending an email to somebody with a picture in it. It leaves your computer and it goes up to the internet. Seems simple, right? Well, wait, because the internet service providers have another thing to confuse you even more. Virtually every home internet connection has what's called an asynchronous type connection. And all that means is that the download speed that we just talked about and the upload speed that we just talked about aren't the same. So when you see those advertisements for high-speed cable internet at 30 megabits per second, that's the download speed. That's how quickly data comes from the internet down into your computer. Now, usually that's the one that matters. The bigger that number, the better. But what they don't usually tell you, and what you sometimes have to ask for because it's hidden in the advertisements, if it's shown at all, is the upload speed. How quickly can that picture that I want to email to somebody get out of my computer and back up to the internet? How long will I have to wait for that to happen? Typically, a high-speed cable internet connection will have a 20, 30, 40, even 50 megabit per second download speed, but the upload speed will only be 2, 3, 4, or 5 megabits up. And finally, let's talk about those upload speeds a little bit more. Now, if all you ever do is surf the web, maybe watch movies, send an email every once in a while, you probably don't care about what your upload speed is, or it's not something that's real significant to you. But consider if you do a lot of Skype calls or FaceTime calls where you're videoing with somebody over the internet. Now, when you're watching somebody else's video over Skype or FaceTime, the data of their video is downloading to your computer over the internet from their computer. Good so far. Your video is uploading from your computer up to the internet and then to their computer. So the quality of the video that they see at their end, even if they have a high-speed download, and even if you have a high-speed download, if your upload speed is low, then the quality will be limited by that upload speed. It's the same way for the video that you receive from them, because even though you have that big download pipe, if their upload to the internet is slow, even though it's coming down to your computer, remember that their upload pipe, if it's smaller, it's going to limit the speed and therefore the quality of the video that you receive. Now again, this may not matter to you or may not matter to you very much. It's just something to be aware of and understand.